The North is a land carved by ice and time, a place where twilight lingers for hours and silence speaks louder than words. Beneath the canopy of blackened pine and within the hollows of ancient fjords, the wind carries more than the cold. It carries whispers, old ones, forgotten ones. They say if you walk alone through the Scandinavian woods at night, you might hear it, a faint wail like that of an infant echoing through the trees. But there is no child. Only the shadows remember. Only the earth knows where the tiny bones lie buried. These are the Myrling, not merely ghosts, but mournful echoes of the silenced. Spirits of children born in secret, smothered by shame, hidden beneath roots and moss, and denied even the dignity of a name. In life, they were invisible. In death, they are unforgettable. The Myrling is not a tale to frighten people. It is a story born of human desperation, of harsh winters and harsher judgment, where the price of survival was sometimes paid with an infant's last breath, where mothers wept in secret and the soil became their only witness. But the earth remembers, the forest listens, and the dead, especially the unburied, do not sleep. Tonight we journey deep into one of the most tragic and chilling sagas in Norse mythology, a tale that forces us to confront guilt, justice, and the lingering cries of those who were never meant to live, yet refuse to be forgotten.
To understand the Myrling, we must step back into a world both beautiful and brutal. Medieval Scandinavia, where life was dictated by the unforgiving rhythm of seasons, and survival often came at the cost of impossible choices. In the isolated villages scattered across icy mountains and shadowed valleys, the pressure to conform to strict social and religious norms was immense. A woman who became pregnant out of wedlock faced not only scorn but condemnation from her church, her community, and even her own family. In such a world where reputation was survival, a single indiscretion could mean ruin. And so some women, alone, desperate, and terrified, chose to end the lives of their newborns. These were not always acts of cruelty, but acts born of fear. Fear of exile, fear of eternal damnation, fear of dishonoring one's kin. The infants, often unnamed, were smothered or drowned shortly after birth, their tiny bodies hidden in shallow graves, under floorboards, behind barns, in peat bogs, or beneath the twisted roots of ancient trees. They were denied a name, denied baptism, denied burial in consecrated ground. In the eyes of the world, they had never existed. But folklore tells us a different truth, that the land remembers, that the sorrow and injustice of these acts seeped into the soil, and that the spirits of these forgotten children rose again as Myrlingar. Not at rest, not at peace. Their cries echo through forests and fens, calling out for the dignity they were never given. The word Myling is thought to derive from the Old Norse myrka, meaning dark or hidden, and it is fitting, for these spirits are born from the darkest corners of secrecy, shame and silence, and they have waited for someone to listen. The Myrling is no ordinary ghost. It is a revenant, not a spirit freed by death, but one imprisoned by it. A soul torn from innocence and bound to the mortal world by violence, injustice, and the deepest kind of sorrow. Unlike spectral figures who float silently or appear in fleeting shadows, Myrlingar are rarely seen before they are heard. Their presence is first felt as a weight in the air, an unnatural chill that settles on the skin, a sorrow that creeps into the bones. Then comes the sound, a muffled cry, thin and reedy like a newborn's wail, echoing in the dark from under the floorboards, from beneath a marsh, or in the hollows of a forest path. It is not the cry of the living, but of the forgotten. Travelers and hunters wandering alone at night speak of being called by name, lured by faint voices or weeping. Others report the sensation of something small and cold climbing onto their backs, whispering its need in a voice that is both pitiful and terrifying. "Carry me to the churchyard." That is the Myrling's plea, not for vengeance, but for rest, for acknowledgement, for sacred ground. But granting that final wish is no easy task. The legends say that when a Myrling climbs upon your back, it begins to grow heavier with every step you take toward a consecrated burial site. The closer you draw to the safety of holy ground, the more unbearable the burden becomes, as though the spirit's suffering is transferring to the living. Some have collapsed under the impossible weight, others have died crushed by a sorrow not their own. The Myrling is not malevolent in the traditional sense. It does not kill out of malice, but out of need. It is grief incarnate, a ghost whose unfinished story demands to be told. It clings to the living not to harm them, but to be seen, to be remembered, and to finally be laid to rest. In some stories, a traveler who succeeds in bringing a Myrling to a churchyard finds that the spirit disappears without a sound, the burden lifted, the air suddenly warm. But in others, the journey is never completed. The Myrling's cries fade into silence, and another grave remains unmarked beneath the snow. Why does a soul linger after death? Why does it return to walk among the living, crying through the mist and moaning beneath the floorboards? The Myrling's answer is simple and devastating. It haunts because no one listened when it mattered most. In life, a Myrling was voiceless, smothered before its first breath, buried without ceremony, erased from memory. It was never baptized, never blessed, never held in open arms. It was a secret, a sin, a shame to be hidden beneath soil and silence. But even the smallest soul seeks justice. The Myrling does not appear for the thrill of fear or chaos. It cries out to be acknowledged. It begs to be named. It demands that someone, anyone, remember that it once lived. And until it is given that dignity, it cannot rest. These spirits are often bound to the place of their death, a cold cabin floor, a marsh, a well, or the base of a tree deep in the woods. There they wait, but the longer they wait, the more the sorrow curdles into rage. Not all Myrlingar are passive mourners. Some return vengeful, twisted by the agony of their betrayal. In these darker stories, the Myrling doesn't simply cry, it screams, it curses, it hunts. The spirit may appear to its mother in dreams or in waking life, pressing tiny cold hands to her chest, whispering accusations that cannot be unheard. Illness, madness, or misfortune often follow, not just for the mother, but for the entire household, even the village. This is not just a ghost, it is a reckoning. In some tales, Myrlingar lash out at communities that turned a blind eye, where neighbors suspected but said nothing, where churches preached mercy yet offered none, where shame was allowed to kill. The spirit becomes a symbol of collective guilt, a voice for the voiceless, a force that demands truth in a world that once refused to speak it. Yet even in wrath, the Myrling's haunting is not aimless. It is a cry for justice, not revenge. If someone, a priest, a traveler, a descendant, acknowledges the child, gives it a name, and brings it to hallowed ground, the Myrling's torment may end. And in that moment, the terrible wailing ceases, the cold lifts, and peace at long last returns. You won't find a Myrling in busy towns or sunlit meadows. These spirits haunt the forgotten places, where moss blankets, ancient stones, and mist lingers long after dawn. Places where nature itself seems to remember what people try to forget. Dense Scandinavian woodlands, with their twisted roots and looming pine silhouettes, are among their favorite domains. So too are cold marshlands, where water bubbles up through peat and fog rolls low over the earth. Abandoned farms, silent and sinking into the soil, are another common refuge, especially those with a sorrowful history. These places are not just lonely, they are wounded. The signs of a Myrling's presence are subtle at first, but unmistakable to those who know how to listen. An unnatural chill, sudden, sharp, and bone deep, even on a summer night. A feeling of being watched when no one is near. The sound of a baby's cry in a place where no child should be. Animals grow uneasy, dogs refuse to enter certain rooms, horses stop at the edge of forest paths trembling, fires crackle and then die without cause. Even the birds fall silent. Then come the more personal signs. Travelers have spoken of invisible weight pressing onto their backs mid-journey, a crushing heaviness, as though something small has latched on, whispering in a thin, desperate voice, "Take me to the churchyard." These experiences are more than unsettling. They are a call as a demand to right a centuries-old wrong. In rare moments, the Myrling appears. Sometimes it manifests as a pale, skeletal child in ragged burial cloth, its eyes hollow, its face void of expression, but filled with sorrow. Other times it is a dark, writhing shadow, crawling low through the underbrush, dragging unseen pain behind it. The cry they emit is the most haunting of all. It is neither wholly human nor fully animal. It is a sound that cuts through reason, the echo of suffering left to rot in silence. Folktales say if you hear a Myrling's cry once, it will follow you. If you ignore it, misfortune grows. And if you mock it, you invite the spirit's wrath. The wisest thing one can do when signs of the Myrling appear is to stop, to listen, to ask the land gently what it remembers. And if the whisper comes and if the child's voice pleads in the dark, then heed it, because some spirits do not return to rest on their own, but with your help, they might. To free a Myrling is not a task of strength or magic. It is an act of compassion, of memory, and of courage. These spirits are not driven by malice alone. They are weighed down by what was denied to them: a name, a voice, a grave, a chance to be mourned. And so to release them, the first step is truth, brutal, necessary truth. The secret must be spoken aloud. The deed must be brought into light, even if the shame spans generations. In ancient villages across Scandinavia, when a Myrling was suspected to haunt a place, the elders would perform hushed ceremonies, rituals both sacred and secret, often passed down orally, from healer to healer. Songs were sung at the place of hidden burial, soft cradle songs, as if to soothe the restless child. Offerings of milk, bread, or tiny carved toys were left as gifts to the wandering soul. In some traditions, women who had lost children, or midwives, were tasked with carving crosses into nearby stones or trees, marking the land as sanctified. Priests, if informed, could intervene by blessing the site and petitioning the spirit through prayer and ritual. But not all Myrlingar found peace through clergy. Some required a more personal penance. A family member or descendant would sometimes visit the grave alone and call the spirit by name, if it had one. If not, they would give the child a name of their choosing, speaking it aloud into the wind, carving it into wood, or writing it on parchment buried with a candle. The power of names cannot be overstated in Norse tradition. To name something is to give it form, recognition, existence. For a Myrling, this is everything. Without a name, it is only grief. With a name, it is a soul, one that can be laid to rest. The final step is burial. The remains, if found, must be brought to hallowed ground, a churchyard, a holy hill, a place blessed by the divine. If the body is long gone, then a symbolic grave may be created, where the spirit can be honored and remembered. But the greatest healing does not come from rituals or relics. It comes from remembrance. To tell their story, to speak their truth, to lift their name from silence, this is how the Myrling finds peace. In being remembered, they are no longer alone, and in being acknowledged, they are no longer forsaken. Because, even in death, no child deserves to be forgotten. The Myrling is more than a ghost of Norse legend. It is a mirror held up to society's most painful truths. These stories, born from desperation and buried in shame, were not only warnings of spiritual unrest, they were testimonies of forgotten lives and the silent suffering of those denied compassion. In ancient times, the Myrling was a cautionary tale, a supernatural punishment for the most taboo crime, the murder of one's own child. But beneath the horror lies a more human story, one of mothers forced into impossible decisions by poverty, fear, or societal judgment. The Myrling legend exposes the cracks in the structures that were meant to protect life, yet turned a blind eye to its quiet destruction. In this way, the Myrlingar are more than restless spirits. They are unresolved guilt, collective trauma, cultural shadows that never quite dissipate. Today, the legend of the Myling has not faded. It has transformed. Modern Nordic literature, art and cinema have reclaimed the figure not merely as a ghost, but as a powerful symbol of the silenced, those erased by history, by shame, by silence. Writers and filmmakers have used the Myrling to explore themes of generational trauma, postnatal grief, and the dark inheritance of family secrets. Visual artists depict them not as monsters, but as grieving children, lost souls caught between worlds, carrying the weight of societal sins. In contemporary novels, a Myrling may emerge not from a forest, but from the edges of memory, haunting a grandmother's attic or appearing in dreams as a cry for truth. In psychological horror films, the Myrling's voice becomes a metaphor for the stories we bury and the cost of silence. The impact reaches beyond fiction. In academic circles, the Myling is studied as an archetype of forgotten voices, much like the ghost stories from other cultures that speak of injustice masked as folklore. Through these interpretations, the Myrling becomes universal, the spirit of the unwanted, the abandoned, the unspoken. Haunting is not just about spirits that linger. It's about the truths we refuse to face, the echoes of choices unacknowledged and pain unprocessed. Thus, the Myrling remains with us, not merely as a shadow in the woods, but as a voice in the back of the mind asking not to be feared, but to be remembered. The Myrling does not haunt us for vengeance alone. It lingers because it was never seen, never heard, never held. These are not just ghost stories. They are echoes of lives denied, names never spoken, and lullabies left unsung. In the hush of the forest, in the cold breath of northern winds, their cries still drift, not to terrify, but to be known. To demand that someone at last listens. The tale of the Myrling is a dark one, but within it lies a quiet plea for healing. It reminds us that every soul, no matter how brief its time, leaves an imprint on the world. That buried truth festers. That silence has a cost. To remember the Myrling is to confront the failings of the past, the judgment, the fear, the shame, and to choose a different path. A path of acknowledgement, of truth, of empathy. So when the wind whispers through the trees or the night feels heavy with sorrow, do not turn away. Listen. For in the softest cries of the forgotten, we hear not just grief, but hope. The hope that no child, born or unborn, will ever be erased by silence again. May the Myrlingar find peace, and may we find the courage to speak their names.
Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.